Hey everybody, Gavin here. Good evening. Good to see you guys in there. It looks like we are live and running, so hope you guys can pop in there. Just thought I'd go live tonight. Let me know how the picture and the sound are looking. I've got the wireless, the Rode Go hooked up tonight. So let me know how everything's looking. And AK Lady, I see you in there. Tony, TXGT, Tampa Bay. Hey everybody. Good to see you guys in there. Just thought we'd do a quick Q&A tonight and just talk a few minutes because I like to do these every now and then and just kind of talk about, answer some questions. Thanks guys. Thanks for all the love and shout outs. And it's always good to see that encouragement in there after reading the comment section and the trolls every time I post a video. So you dedicated amigos are always appreciated. But I shout out to all the people still surviving in Estados Unidos y mi compadres en Mexico, Colombia, y más y más y más. Buenas noches. So what I want to do is we'll talk. Before you start asking your questions, I'm just going to do a few introductions. Not so much here to answer personal questions, because there's always trolls in there like, Gavin, why do you do this? Gavin, why do you do that? And you can ask those, but I'm probably going to ignore them. What I'm here to do is to talk a little bit of just about what we've been seeing down here and answer some of your guys' questions and try to keep them short and sweet and to the point. And AC in there, good to see you. Everybody. So, all right, what do you think? You know, I've been watching down here and it's sometimes a struggle because I post these videos and I'm a person that has a difficult time to not stand up to bullies. And people think that I go out looking for trouble with police and things like that. And it's really not true. It's genuinely a struggle with me to see someone doing something wrong when I'm present, when I see it, when they're doing it to me, when they're doing it to someone else, and not stand up. And that's why I stand up to police that are breaking the law and things like that. It doesn't matter whether it's Mexico or the USA. And all week people have been saying, Gavin, you're an idiot. Gavin, they're going to kill your family for doing this. Gavin, you deserve to have them killed, right? You deserve to be shot. I can't wait to see what happens to you when they deal with you, Gavin. I mean, it's literally constant, day in and day out. And sometimes I think, people are like, well, Gavin's so hostile. Gavin's so hostile. Maybe I get a little jaded sometimes because I hear hatred all day long. I see hatred all day long. And of course, there's those of you that are right on board and that get it. But there's so many people, there's so many brainwashed sheep, and they're so filled with vitriol and anger. And they're so enslaved, and it really makes them angry if you are not enslaved. Thank you, guys. Thank you. If you're not enslaved, if you don't act like a slave, it makes them angry. And that happens really anywhere you go in the world to varying degrees, right? So in Mexico, I think people are a little more likely to resist. There's less police worship. There's more freedom by a long shot. But there's still a lot of sheep, right? There's a lot of people that say, no, the government says, do what you're told. There's a lot of people on the video I did last week where these thugs at a checkpoint pointed guns at me and I stood up to them. And while that didn't go anywhere bad, you know, you have all these people like, oh, you don't know what Mexico's like, they're going to kill you, and I'm looking forward to it. I mean, this is the kind of comments I get all day long. Your kids should be taken away. That's usually a U.S. thing. One way to tell if it's a fake Mexicano account, if they're not actually a Mexican in Mexico, is if they're saying your kids should be taken away. Because you don't get your kids taken away in Mexico. That's a U.S. fascist thing, right? So there's levels of the fascism and the government abuse. And as we see people, you know, like Leonard Peltier in prison, Schaefer Cox, Jeff Winehouse, Jim Hamilton, all these guys that have just been railroaded in the system, right? All over the world, especially in the USA, as people pretend they have freedom, as Independence Day, thanks Matthew, as Independence Day is coming up, as all of these evils continue to spread. You've got the case in, is it Indiana? What is that case? I'm trying to look here real quick. The name of the guy that, I think it's Indiana or Missouri, that they're going to execute. They're planning to execute this guy next month. And he's been proven factually innocent. This guy's been on death row for like 20 something years. and they're planning to execute him. His name is Larry Swearington. You can Google that. Just look up Larry Swearington. And this is a guy that's been proven factually innocent, and they still plan to execute him. Okay, this is how bad it is. They planned to execute this guy when he's already been proven factually innocent, and the courts and prosecutors are simply ignoring it. Oh well, we think he's still guilty. It's unbelievable. And it's important that we speak out. And so when I stand up on the internet, people say, well, you're always negative. And I'm like, well, the world is a dark and abusive place, and someone has to speak out for it. If me speaking out for the innocent and the poor is being negative, then what's being positive? Obeying, doing what you're told, saying, Heidel? Is that being positive? Waving a flag like everybody's going to be doing this weekend as they go into the parks? Thanks, Drumroll. As they go into the parks and there's a list of rules 4 feet long, and they say, oh, we're here to celebrate our freedom. And the cop standing there with a gun ready to shoot them is like, well, don't bring any pets, don't bring any alcohol, no horseplay. I mean, it's unreal, guys. It's unreal. And yes, it upsets me. And it upsets me when I see that down here too, when I see police violating the law. And people will say to me, well, you just need to follow the law. And I'm like, I'm the one following the law. The police will say, you lack respect. And I'm like, no, you lack respect, right? And so I try to be calm, and sometimes it's difficult in tense situations to be calm. I try to do the best to control myself, not to let words come out of my mouth that are just flippant and angry. I think that's important for us, and to love my neighbor and to speak up. And so we do that, I think. People are always hating on that, and I really think it's because, in a way, they're ashamed, because they cower. The world cowers and does what it's told, and when someone doesn't do that, they're kind of considered a nut job and a radical. And the best way to not feel guilty about not standing up for yourself is to call someone nuts that does stand up. So if that's not you, salute. If you're standing up, if you're loving your neighbor, all right? Tear down the prisons, tear down the walls. There are no illegal immigrants. The idea that a person, that a human being can be illegal is contrary to humanity itself. It's contrary to God's law, to natural law, if you prefer. It's contrary to the constitutions. It's absolutely constant. And so sometimes people think I'm just being egotistical, or they say, Gavin, tú eres un pendejo. It doesn't matter where they're coming from in the world. And of course, the trolls on here are always going to do that. But sometimes people don't understand. And you know what? I just ask God for some protection. Because sure, it's scary. Sure, it's scary to be the one sticking your neck out, especially when you're a foreigner, right? But it was scary in the U.S. In a lot of ways, it's less scary here. But I still feel vulnerable. I'm still the outsider. I'm still the gringo. I'm still the foreigner. And foreigners are abused all the time. I get to see from the immigrant's perspective now. But okay, just kind of wanted to share a few thoughts there with you guys, kind of about what it's like, right? What it's like from this end, what it's like being down here and seeing all this stuff and everybody freaking out. Constitutional Corner, thank you. But let's get to some Q&A before this gets too long. So I'm going to watch the chat, and I'm going to watch for some good questions in here. We may not be able to answer every question. Maybe every other question. It's possible. It is possible. You'll be answer. Okay, so throw those out there. And I don't want them to be questions in general. They're about Mako. All right, so if you've asked it previously, ask it again. Cowboys Nation says, how am I liking Mako? Overall, yeah, Mako I really like. As a refugee and someone who escaped the US and really can't go back, I feel vulnerable, but I like the people, I like the freedom. The corruption is still here. The abuse is still here, but it's so much different and so much less, and people are so much more prone to resist because they don't worship police and military. Marijuana laws here. Actually, and I'm not super intimate with this, but as I understand it, following the rulings down here, basically the marijuana prohibition this year is being lifted. That it was a Supreme Court ruling that had to do with the amparos, and people were just filing amparos against it. And so there's, as far as I can tell, it's not laid out like, can you grow it, can you sell it, things like that. But as I understand it, for the past while, basically people that possess marijuana are not being arrested. In fact, I've visited with Mexicans that were openly using it. Thanks, Political Trends, appreciate it. And then there's also been some major national level deregulation down here. So not knowing all the specific details, I don't want to give you bad information, but we have been following it and kind of watching it like we do all the things that are going on down here that affect our human rights. And so there's definitely some progress on there. Somebody asked, how do you get out of the USA and get to Mexico? There's a lot of videos about me doing that on this channel. There's also some videos. There's a video in the Escaping the USA category on this channel where Nathan and I talk about immigration policies and if you want to follow the rules, how that all works so that you don't get in any hassle by the bureaucrats, things like that. So check that out. But essentially, you have to make the decision and you have to leave. And you have to be willing to leave everything behind for a lot of people. If you have an RV or something, that really helps because you can live fairly easily and fairly cheaply down here. If you have an online income or money saved or a retirement or a YouTube channel that's profitable, you can live down here decently. A couple could come down here and live well in an RV for $1,000, $1,200 a month, right? So the cost of living is very low. Comparatively, I would say a third to a quarter in general for basic cost of living. Okay, now I'm not seeing all your comments as I ask the questions, so if you have a question, I will look for it. And in terms of escaping the USA, are there alternatives to Mexico? Yeah, I think most countries in the world have more freedom and less government abuse than the USA. And you can measure that by how many people your police kill, by how many people are in prison. Remember that the USA has more people in prison per capita than any nation in the world, even the most fascist regimes, okay? That's an important thing to consider because essentially it means the USA is the worst in the essential ways, right? That doesn't mean that there's not homework to be done. Even Canada is far less abusive of people, even though there's a lot of growing abuses there, they haven't got to where the USA is. So these are important things to understand, okay? I'm looking for things about Mexico tonight. So let's see. Yeah, if you're in an RV, Mexico is a no-brainer. If you come in Sonora, just go down the coast. There's actually quite a lot of Canadians and gringos that come down that coast in Sonora State, and there's actually campgrounds and RV resources. Because remember, the infrastructure is different here. Mexicanos don't travel like we're used to. That culture that we got in the 50s with the interstate system and the traveling and the movies were about it and the culture is about it. The American road trip kind of mindset that we have in the USA doesn't exist. It's very common for me to meet Mexicans, and I'll talk to them about where I've been in Mexico, and they're kind of shocked because they've never even left their home state. So there's a lot less of a travel culture here, and I hope that changes as people stand up to the corruption, the road systems are improved, the tolls are taken away. Okay, let's see here. And thank you guys for the nice comments. I'm just looking, and somebody says, well, without donations, how do you earn money? Guys, I don't live off donations. I mean, when I do videos like this and you guys pitch in, that's great. When people sponsor my channel and give $5 a month by hitting that join button, hint, hint, that's awesome. And that support is great, but I don't live off donations. I work online, I'm in photography. I do earn some revenue off YouTube, and theoretically for a YouTuber that has a decent following, yeah, I mean, there's people that come down here and they vlog about Mexico, the Kinnons and Tangerines and stuff like that, and they're supporting themselves off those videos. So there's certainly possibilities for that, but you can come down here and work if you're skilled. You could start a little business of your own. If you don't, you got to remember that Mexico is a real economy compared to the US. It's not a socialist economy like the USA. So you're not going to come down here and demand that someone pay you a minimum livable wage because this isn't a socialist country like the USA is. So if you come down here, you're going to get paid what the going rate is for something. And if you're a box boy at a grocery store or you're serving tables at a taco shop, that's not going to be very much. If you're a waiter at a nice restaurant and you speak good Spanish, you might do well. Most of the people that do well here that don't have an external income, and I've talked to them, I meet gringos and people from out of country that are just doing their own thing down here and they're just working or they have a little business on the side. I mean, I met a guy once from the States, a young guy, younger than me. He was making his living just making like fancy cupcakes, like baked goods, and just selling them, walking around the street selling them. And he's like, yeah, it pays the bills. I mean, so you got to remember that there's a lot more economic freedom down here to do things, but don't expect a free ride. Like if you want socialism, if you want programs and minimum wages and unemployment and all those kind of things, like you have to live in a socialist country like the USA. And there probably are more socialist countries that have less regulation and less fascism and imprisonment than the USA do, for sure, especially in Europe. But I'm not really into the socialist thing. I don't really like to live by stealing from other people. So what else? Just looking through the messages here, trying to find these cops in Mexico, like Officer Pat Kennedy. There's thugs everywhere. People who are in government tend to be thugs. The difference is, I've talked about this a lot. Am I back? Am I back, people? Here, I thought YouTube just cut me off because I was talking about freedom too much. All right, good. I'm back. We're good. Resuming. Where were we? The app just like completely cut off the stream, but it did allow me to restart it. So that's good. I'm just looking here. Somebody says Canada's way more corrupt and restrictive than Mexico. No, they're absolutely not. And I haven't been to Canada in a while. Nathan's been to Canada numerous times to check this out recently as well. Canada has one of the lowest prison populations in the world, and their police abuse is an absolute tiny fraction. There's a reason I didn't go to Canada. Canada plays ball with the US like crazy. Canada has that kind of Western gringo culture. They tend to be milder mannered, and Canadians are generally really nice, but there's a ton of rules and restrictions and controls. But actually, in general, the USA is far more socialist and far more fascist in almost every way. And if you look at the USA's prison population of like 700 people per 100,000, and then Canada's is like 60. I mean, we're talking about a massive night and day difference. Guys, it's very relevant to actually choose a country by whether or not the governments are always going to try and control you and be abusive. It's hugely relevant to choose where you live to some degree, to a large extent, by how many people are being murdered and imprisoned by the government. The USA, yeah, that's absolutely right, Mario. The USA is the next Germany, and everybody's completely, not everybody, 90% of the people are completely ignorant of it. So it's madness. It's absolutely madness. If you have a country with liberty, you don't have larger prisons. You don't have people being locked in prisons all the time. You don't have kangaroo courts that beat even places like Saudi Arabia for corruption. Okay, the USA is the worst of the worst in terms of abusing people in their justice system, in their prison system, killing people on the street. They are fascist to the max, Fashomax, the Fashomax 500. All right, so what else? Let's look here. Let's see here, just looking. Somebody says audit Mexican cops and military. I've done both of those things numerous times. In fact, just posted a video on my Facebook, I think it was a couple weeks ago, and I'll probably do a video on here talking about that more, but of the military guys, some military guys on the street trying to tell me I couldn't film them, and I simply nicely said, hey, back off, this is my right. And then I went and talked to the guy and said, you need to tell your commanders not to molest us for filming. Now, when I say molesto in Spanish is like harass. Molest doesn't mean, in English, molest is generally something sexual, and in Spanish, molest is simply harassment, right? Yo molestame. It means you're pestering me, you're harassing me, you're annoying me, you know. No molestame, no molestame. Okay, just a little English lesson for you. Okay, looking back at the questions here, is it easy to grow your own food in Mexico, like chickens, turkeys, and rabbits? Yeah, I mean, the idea of government telling you can't have chickens or you can't have a cow, you don't see, I mean, people run businesses out of their back door of their house. I mean, this is absolutely normal culture. in Mexico. And so, I mean, it's very normal. You'll be driving down the interstate and people will be herding their cows down the road. They'll be grazing in the medians, right? So it's a very different world. And we're back to that same thing. Sure, there's corruption and bad things. There's all the damage that the drug war has done and the violence that it's caused. There's Mexican politicians playing games with U.S. politicians to abuse the immigrants and all these things that outrage me and that I feel like the people here should be, and sometimes they very much are outraged about. But in the overall sense, the individual freedom, the assumption that you have a right to exist and to do things is generally a given. And yeah, you don't get a license to fish. I believe the way it works here usually is they've got some regulations. If you go to Baja and you're going on a deep sea fishing trip, yeah, they're getting permits and stuff for that. I think what they kind of do officially is if you're fishing from a boat in the ocean or something like that, then people are supposed to get permits. But it's not like you have game wardens running around. So yeah, like the idea that you can live off the land is normal here. If there's a lake and you go put a pole in the lake and catch a fish to eat and feed yourself, that's not against the law. You genuinely probably could like just live off the land here. And not to mention the fact that it basically never freezes. Like you literally could like just build, and people do. You can build a little hovel and squat on the land and then work up from there. I'm not saying that's the best approach for a foreigner because we don't know all the ins and outs of all that, but you know what I mean. Okay, in your opinion, what is the toughest thing to deal with in Mexico? The language, for sure. If you do one thing for yourself, your children, your family right now, even if you can't leave right now, and you say, well, what can I do? It's learn Spanish, because Spanish opens up most of America, right? Remember that the USA is not America. The USA is the United States. It is a partial piece of America. And most of the rest of America and all its beauty speaks Spanish as the dominant language. So yes, speak Spanish. Learn to speak Spanish. Don't do this thing that's like, oh, you know, English is the best. No, it's not. The world does not speak English, guys. That's not what the world speaks. And this idea of learning one language and being pride in our ignorance, very bad idea. So learn Spanish or whatever area you may think you want to go. But remember, with Spanish, you have, with the exception of like Brazil, because they speak Portuguese there, and there's a couple countries, right? But you have almost all of America. You have Spain. Once you learn Spanish, if you know English, things like French and Italian become vastly easier. So like this is really, learning Spanish really opens up the world, okay? And just looking, is it cheap over there? Dentist, doctors, rent. That's a good question, because actually that was the poster on this image, was us at the dentist this week. I've been getting some dental work done, getting some fills. Had this huge cavity that they filled out this week, and he was grinding away in there. And here's a funny story. Dr. George, if you're listening to this, don't be offended, just take this as a tip. Dr. George was carving on my mouth this week. And so I'm laying there, I had some local anesthesia, and he's in there with his like dentist Dremel tool that they use. And I'm just like, and he knows what he's doing. Like you can tell that Dr. George really loves dentistry. And there's numerous very good English speaking dentists in this, okay, in this office, in this clinic. And so because of that, it's a little more expensive. And it's a little bit more high end. It's one of the best rated clinics in the area. And it actually kind of caters to people coming from Canada and the US and other countries that are coming in to get procedures done. So he's grinding away. And this cavity apparently is bigger than they thought, right? So he's grinding and grinding. And of course, with a fill, they don't want to go through the tooth. If they go through the tooth and break through the pulp, that's bad. Then you get into the territory of not being able to fill it, and root canals or removal of the tooth, because now it's exposed. So they can't grind all the way through. So he's trying to get rid of this cavity and fill it in and go through that process. And you know, he's grinding away, and he looks, and he's like talking to the other lady dentist in Spanish. And then he looks down at my mouth, and he's like looking down and kind of there, he's grinding away. And he looks in there again, and he goes, "Oh my God." And I'm like sitting there kind of like, my mouth's on them. And I'm just like, bro, You don't say. You don't say that while you're hanging over me drilling a hole in my mouth. And he got it resolved. He figured it out, got it all out of there and got it filled. And I think it's more of a language thing, right? He's very good at English, but things don't always translate to like exactly what you're saying and how you're expressing yourself in Spanish. So while it was a little disturbing, but it was also pretty funny. Okay. All right. So continuing on with the questions. And yes, things like dental work, medical work, especially if you have a U.S. income, yeah, for us, they're a lot cheaper. Dentists, for example, are very prolific. I would say dental work is a half to a quarter, depending on where you go, of what you would pay to the USA. A lot of major procedures, like if you need new implants or something like that, I would say probably are down in the third to a quarter of what they cost in the USA. So those are things to think about. Do they have Taco Bell there? No, they do not. There are no Taco Bells in Mexico at this time. I believe a couple Taco Bells opened in Ciudad de Mexico, which is Mexico City, bigger than New York, biggest city in the country. Actually, I think it's the biggest city next to maybe Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. I think it's the biggest city in the American continent right now. It's bigger than any city in the USA. And there was a Taco Bell there a few years ago, I believe. Probably this is on Wikipedia. And no, it didn't make it because Taco Bell does not sell tacos. Taco Bell sells food that arguably, particularly if you're conditioned to it like we gringos are, that is arguably tasty in a fake, chemically sort of way, in a fake, I died a little inside when I ate it sort of way, but unusually tasty, and it's ironic that they're the place that's open all night because that's not really what you want to be eating at 1 a.m. before you go to bed. Another topic. But no, here you get real tacos. So Taco Bell tacos. In fact, if I want to amuse, particularly the young people, like the teenagers, I'll be talking to them, we'll be in a restaurant or something, and I'll pull up a photo of a Taco Bell taco on YouTube, and I'll say, in the United States, this is a taco. And they look at it and they're like, ¿qué? Este no es un taco. and like they're genuinely confused. Like when they look at a hard shell Taco Bell taco, that's not a taco. That's not what a taco looks like, and that's never what a taco has looked like. A taco is a distinctly Mexican food. Hang on, I'm trying to adjust the mic so it doesn't, let me know if the sound weirds out. And so yeah, no Taco Bell. All right, what else? Did I miss any other important questions? Because we're approaching 30 minutes here, so we're gonna wrap up a little bit. Do you go to OXXO on a regular basis? Yes, everyone goes to OXXO on a regular basis because there's an OXXO, which for those of you that don't know is the primary convenience store. OXXOs are not gas stations. Well, there's a lot of gas stations now that have OXXOs at them, but OXXO will probably be the equivalent to like a 7-Eleven in the 70s, right? And so yeah, the kids love OXXO. Everybody goes to OXXO. I mean, like you can get everything from fresh eggs to, OXXO has a little bit of everything. Like you'll see things in OXXO, and that's something here is stores like, for example, the grocery store sells motorcycles. And this is a normal thing, right? Most grocery stores sell motorcycles. So if you go to the grocery store and you have $800, you can ride out with a brand new motorcycle to carry your groceries home. These are like normal things. And so when you go to OXXO, hey babe, I see you in there. Hello, howdy. When you go to OXXO, you not only can get things like beer and chips and stuff like that, but you can get pretty much everything else also. This mic is kind of annoying me the way it's sitting here. So let me know if it's okay. Okay, just looking. Are there a lot of GMOs in Mexico? I mean, I think GMO corn is kind of everywhere, but it's way easier to get homegrown because everything's not regulated. So you can go to somebody's backyard farm and buy milk. We buy raw milk just from the farmer, right? Which is illegal in the USA, except for in certain areas where if they follow incredible amounts of regulations, they can do it. The idea that the government restricts the food someone sells is not a concept. Just like the idea of CPS kicking in your door with cops and kidnapping your children. These are things that honestly, when we tell them this is how it works in the USA, people that have not lived there or been there extensively oftentimes are skeptical. Like it's hard for them to fathom that the government would steal kids, right? It's hard for them to fathom. I was talking to a nice family at a restaurant recently, and we were talking about the police and how there's corruption, but I was like, here if a drunk or a mentally ill man, let's say, or somebody that was high maybe, was walking the street corner and he got into an altercation with a cop, and I pointed down to the road, and the cop started beating and kicking him. I said, in the States, everybody just stands around and they're afraid to do anything. And they're like, no. Here, like, there would be 20 people on the cop in seconds. And that's absolutely like the culture. A cop would not simply beat someone in the middle of the road. It simply would not be tolerated in the general sense. That doesn't mean bad things. The cops aren't doing bad things privately, but cops do not shoot and beat people to death or choke them in the middle of the road like we see every day in the USA. Remember, in the USA, the cops murder 3 to 5 people a day. And the Mexicanos, despite the problems and the corruption, they're shocked. I mean, this is unthinkable. If a police officer kills a civilian in Mexico, that's a big deal. And it's like the video I did last week where I was arguing with the police and they pulled guns, and I was outraged that they pulled guns on me. And it was right to be outraged. And people said, oh, you almost got shot. They would have shot you. It's not like that. Like, the last time someone ran a checkpoint in Mexico, this was up north at the border, they ran like a military checkpoint, and I think they might have even been trafficking drugs, and the military shot them. Within a week, those officers that shot the people for running the checkpoint were charged with murder. Like, if you haven't escaped the USA, it's hard to understand, because police can literally do anything and get away with it. It was a big deal, right? That these cops murdered these guys and shot them, and the cops claimed, they were shooting at us. And I think they may have even, I can't remember the story exactly, but these guys may have even had drugs and guns in their car. And it was examined, and it's like, this gun hasn't been fired. They were not shooting at you, right? And so even the fact, like, pretty much for a cop to shoot someone here and get away with it, the person better be actually shooting at them first, right? It's a whole different animal in terms of that, because there's not this mindless police worship. John asks, is there Mexicans that are racist? Absolutely. In fact, the Mexicans will readily tell you that their culture is very racist. So while I see their culture as warm and much more caring as a whole, there's definitely this thing, and it's getting worse because of the USA pushing their fascism and their abuse of immigrants on Mexico, and the politicians doing that and abusing people at the southern border. So while the borders in Mexico are far more open, and really the borders on Mexico on any side, you can just walk in and out of without being molested. But that doesn't mean that if you don't have the right visas and stuff, that if someone stops you, particularly if you're near the border, that they won't harass you. And that you couldn't get deported, particularly, and this is very saddening and offensive to me and to anyone who cares about human rights, is them abusing the people from the southern border. So there's definitely, and it makes no sense. There's definitely this Mexico for Mexico, they're coming into our country. You definitely see, especially the Mexicans that are English speakers and follow U.S. culture, you see them repeating the U.S. propaganda. It's not near to the same extent. The level of hate and absolute mindless abuse, taking people's kids away and giving them to other people, that isn't tolerated here yet. But you are seeing more of that. I did a video on this a couple weeks ago talking about the reality of what's going on the borders in Mexico. And I'm not involved in the politics of Mexico directly. I just analyze, and talk about the human rights aspect. But you see the politicians playing games and selling out people's freedom no matter where you go, okay? Let's see. Cartels are 10 times more abusive than what? Than U.S. police? I mean, U.S. police are the cartel. They're just the dominant cartel in the USA. And there's probably no cartel in the world that in a general sense is more abusive. There's a lot of violence from the cartels and fighting between each other. And, it's very sad because it's all created by the drug war and all this fighting and warring and going to war with cartels. And you know what? There's a lot of craziness there. There's a lot of U.S. pushing that violence. They want that violence. They want that destabilization of the Latin American countries. I mean, that's why there's a lot of refugees from places like Honduras, because the USA intentionally destabilized their government using manipulation and human abuse and controlling politics and stuff. So, people say, oh, all these immigrants are coming to the U.S. That's because the USA is a terrorist nation, and we actually actively went into a lot of these countries and destroyed their country for them. Again, another thing to consider. okay? Checkpoints are worldwide. Checkpoints are illegal worldwide, and they're especially illegal under the constitutions of Mexico and of the United States, but in the human rights sense, they're illegal. Someone does not get to don a uniform and say, I'm an authority because I have a gun, and so I get to stop you, violate you, search through your stuff, and abuse you and detain you when you've done nothing wrong. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. That's immoral. End of story. It's not for safety. It's not for freedom. It's not for justice. And yes, Mexico is far more welcoming to the immigrants overall than the USA. I mean, the USA, people say, oh, we're not racist. We just want them to do it the right way. That's nonsense. The hate and racism has become so much that we're not even allowing people to follow the legal process for asylum in the USA, and all our immigration policies are completely illegal and a violation of the Constitution, all our restrictions. But we're not even allowing people to immigrate legally anymore. So when people tell you we just want it to be legal, no, they don't. The USA and the fake patriots there and the so-called Christians that are saying build the wall, they hate human rights and immigrants. It's just the reality of it. They're racists. And I don't throw that word around loosely. I don't just like calling everybody a racist because they have opinion. Like the USA is genuinely, and that's how Mexico sees them, but they also see it in themselves. The USA is an extremely racist country, and that's why we treat the immigrants and the poor that way. It's just the reality of it. It's not that we just abuse people of other races. We also abuse the poor, the weak, the fatherless, the widow. But it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. So what else? Thank you, guys. I got to wrap up here. It's getting late. I need to go spend a little time with the kids before bed. Hello, Mexico. I'm just looking here. Yeah, Germany, I hear Germany is pretty restricted. You got to remember, there's almost no country in the world where the police are as violent and abusive. So that's one thing. Like, even if you choose somewhere where they speak English, right? And there's probably going to be a lot of rules and things that annoy you and socialism kind of things. But at least you don't have to walk down the street and expect to be murdered by a cop every time you interact with them. It's a different deal. It's a different deal. So. Generally, I mean, I find there's of course different people. Have I been treated bad here by Americans? Yeah, there was the issue when I went to Halpan. There's a video on it, and the guy was a complete jerk. I don't know what his biases were. Maybe he just hated gringos, and it was on video. And he wouldn't let my son go to the bathroom, and he was insulting me, and I was just like, wow, dude, what is your problem, right? And I just left, and then I put it on video, and it was, last I heard, he's no longer in business. But it's sad when people hate each other. And people think that because I get upset and because I get passionate and because I stand up to bullies and I can be very assertive with people that are abusing other people's rights, that I'm hateful and that I'm just losing it. And I'm not. I don't want to hurt anybody. That's not in my nature. I just want human rights to be respected. And so, all the haters saying, they're going to kill you, they're coming for you, I'm coming for you. I get these kind of things all the time. And at the end of the day, I just got to, ask God for some protection, because I can't fix the world. I can just say, the best I can. I can just do the best I can. But, okay, any other questions before we wrap up? I'm just looking. The migration process from USA to Mexico, it's very easy. Remember, first of all, you have Sonora State, which is essentially like a free zone. Like, they don't really allow immigration to be enforced in Sonora State because it damages their tourism. So basically, you can just be in Sonora State, which is good for people that need to get out of the USA. Maybe they can't get a passport or something like that, and they need to become refugees. Of course, once you get here, you could look into the official refugee programs and stuff like that, like a lot of Guatemalans and Hondurans and stuff are doing. But if you can have a passport, it's just going to make your life easier. And as long as you can come in, it used to be you didn't need a visa or anything, right? There was no visa. You could just come visit Mexico. And the USA was so abusive to the Mexicanos that kind of in retaliation, Mexico started saying, okay, well, if you're going to come here, you got to get a visa too. But you can come into the border and you don't get stopped and asked for your documents at the border. The border is open in Mexico. There might be some people there and a station there, and occasionally they'll stop and want to look through your vehicle and stuff like that at the border, which I don't approve of either, even though that's common at borders. It's still a violation. But the border is open. You can go, they're not going to stop you at the border for documents. That's not how it works. If you go, you usually go a few miles inland and there's an office where you stop to get a visa, and you can get a visa up to 6 months, right? Without applying for residency or anything. You basically just fill out the form and give them $20 and they give you a visa. And they actually ask you how long you want to be there. So you don't want to tell them a month, like you're like 180 days and that's the max. And they'll just write 180 days and you've got a 180-day visa to explore Mako. Do I recommend going outside that? If you can avoid it, no. Like, it's true that the racism is much less toward gringos than it is toward the Southern Americans, the more Southern Americans. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't get harassed or even deported, particularly if you're in a border state or way down south. I've never been asked for my papers in Mako. Police officers are not allowed to ask for your papers. That's not to say they don't ever violate that. Officially, though, only an immigration official can ask you for documents. And it's way less aggressive because you have to remember, it's not a crime. It's not a crime to be an undocumented immigrant in Mako. That's officially not a crime. It's more like a violation. And they can legally, like, this is still immoral, of course. They can deport you. They can say you have to leave according to the rules that they've made up. And I'm not saying that can't happen, because it does happen to people. It happens to lots of Southern Americans, a lot less than the USA, but still lots. It's very common for me to meet people here that don't have documents, even Southern Americans, Guatemalans, Hondurans, things like that. Very, very common. In particular, once they get to the central part of the country, most of the abuse of the Central Americans is stemming from the US saying to Mako, we're gonna punish you. They're actually threatening them and saying, if you don't stop immigrants from traveling freely in your country, we're going to punish you. And so it's actually through extortion from the USA, which is not to excuse the Dominican officials that are abusing people. So you see, if you're in the middle of the country, you'll actually see a lot of immigrants that definitely don't have papers, and they're just doing their thing. Sometimes they're begging for money on the street corner. Sometimes they're working in the shops, and I know some of them. And they're usually really nice guys. And I don't see, immigration officials running around that much. If you go to the immigration offices in town, sure. I've actually seen some people being deported before. When I walked by, and when I was near the immigration office, and they were loading them in the van, and I was upset about this. I don't like seeing people being abused, but to understand the difference, like, they were not being let out in handcuffs. There was like women, children, men. They were just taking them out to a van, a transporter van that did have bars in it. And they were helping people load their stuff in the van. And they were like, grabbing the kids' teddy bears, and they were loading their stuff in the van, presumably to drive them back or give them a plane flight back to their home country. And I started filming this, and I'm like, hey, you're abusing their rights. Like, you shouldn't be messing with them. And so they called the English speaker in that office, and he said, look, like, he came down and he's like, come up to my office and we'll talk about it, because I was upset about this. And so there was no handcuffs or anything like that present, which was good. But I'm like, hey, you're still like sending people out, and they have a right to travel. They have a right to live. They have a right to be human beings. And he took me up to his office, and he's like, look, here's the process. Here's the papers. We show them these papers, and we tell them, like, if you want to apply for refugee status, you can stay, like, and they sign this paper acknowledging their rights. Now, that's not to say that if you go south, you hear about lots of abuses where they pretend they can't apply for refugee and stuff like that, just like they do in the States. There's a lot of abuses from the bureaucracy, but it's a lot different how they treat people. The general human respect here is a lot different, but that doesn't mean it's perfect, right? Who did my hair, Manuel? The chica in the last video. It's a little uneven, but some people think it's pretty cool. My wife's was telling me it was uneven, and people in the video were like, hey, that's cool, man. And so it's up, you guys tell me, like, is it really uneven? Here, I'll show you from the back. It might be uneven from the back. Okay, there's the back. That's the back. That's the hairdo. $2.50 right there for that haircut, plus a 50-cent tip, of course. All right. Okay, guys. Let's see here. Yes, I homeschool my kids. Food, basic cost of living. Now, if you're buying toys and import goods and iPods and stuff like that, you're going to pay as much or even a little more, right? Electronics, TVs, not always more, but they have Amazon here too. But basic cost of living, like if you're just the living, you get a simple place to rent, you're eating the food, unless you go to one of the expensive cities like Mexico City or Querétaro's a little more, maybe, if you're like in a central or a fancy part of town, it's going to be more. But the basic cost of living, if you're just, I would say, is a third to a quarter less than the USA. You can live here for you can live simple but comfortable here, a couple, for $1,000, $1,200 a month, maybe even less. If you were living out of an RV, probably even less than that. But yes, it's a lot less. It's a lot less. And so as for jobs in Spanish, we talked about that early in the video, so check it out. If you don't speak Spanish, you're probably going to have a difficult time finding a job unless you start your own little business and are selling something that way on the street or something, because there's a lot more economic freedom. But yeah, learning Spanish is a given. So let's see if there's anything else. We've already gone way over time here anyhow. What time is it? It's super late. I got to go because the kids want to spend a little time with me before bedtime. So let's see here. There's always a few trolls. Get rid of those. I'm looking through your questions before we wrap up. Can an American buy land in Mexico? Absolutely. There's some bureaucracy to deal with if you want to buy land close to the borders or the oceans. And there's been some shitty stuff in the past where people have lost that land to people who made legal claims and stuff like that. But yes, you can buy land. And you can buy land outright anywhere but close to the oceans and the borders. If you're inland, you can just own the land outright. And there's some goofy rules. And that's why people, when people tell you can't buy land, it's because they read an article about some shadiness that went down on an oceanfront resort that gringos had bought or something like that. And there's been some corrupt things. You have to understand, the government's stealing people's land all the time in the USA. It's not like this is exclusive. There's way less of that here. So yes, you can buy land. Yes, Saunders covered that one. There's Uber, vaccines. There are vaccines here if you want them. I don't, but I think a lot of the kids, you got to realize that the culture it's not a completely drugged up culture, but of course the pharmaceutical companies are seeing opportunity here. It's way easier to get pharmaceuticals here. Most of the time, whereas in the States, it would cost you hundreds of dollars to go visit a doctor and all this kind of stuff. Most pharmacies will have a consultant that's either free or like $3 or $5, like literally right next to the pharmacy, a consulting doctor, and you just pay a few dollars, he consults with you and he writes you a prescription for what you need, which can be nice, but it's also kind of luring people into this pharmaceutical thing and away from the natural medicine, which of course is also, you don't go to prison for selling natural medicine in Mexico. There's native medicinal doctors on pretty much every street as well. So very common, right? But definitely the pharmaceuticals are down here advertising and promoting their stuff as well. And I think a lot of the schools and stuff, the kids are getting vaccinated, and that's a personal choice. Like, I see a lot of concerns with the vaccination, of course, but the main thing is that you can't have government forcing that kind of stuff on people, and that's really important. We don't need to get into all the talk about that because we could go on for another hour, but yes, Attic, we should have Sandra in a video just talking about the transition. But part of that is we're still working on the transition. We're still trying to deal with things because it's different for us. You have to understand, it's different than somebody saying, okay, we're selling everything, we're happily moving to Mexico. While we like it here, it's different being someone who actually escaped the USA and that is a refugee from the corruption in the USA. And so it's a little more oppressive, I think, because of the whole "we're exiles" thing. We've talked about that in other videos, but we do the best we can. We do the best we can. All right, hey, you kids, Sandra, tell those kids to set up their show, and I will be right out. And yes, I'm very lucky to have a good wife. People will pick on my wife just like they pick on my teeth, and I think a lot of times they're just jealous because they know that their woman would never stick with them like Sandra sticks with me. So yeah. All right, guys. Guemito, gracias. RV parks, yes. Are they like the States? Yeah, if you come along, particularly on the coastlines, you see them less when you come inland. But if a lot of people will enter in Sonora or Baja, I like the crossing Sonora just down below Tucson. And it's very chill down there. It's very welcoming. And there's a lot of, especially if you're not used to it, let's say you just want to come down for the winter maybe and get a feel for Mexico. Coming down the coast, first of all, beaches are amazing, especially in winter in Mexico. I might not want to live on humid, and being a northerner, the heat and humidity is a struggle for me. If you're from Georgia, yeah, it's probably going to be no problem for you. But the beaches Mexico has some of the best beaches in the world. So it's very easy for an RVer, despite the roads are smaller, it's going to be a little more work for you, but it's very common for people from Canada. There used to be a lot from the USA, but they're all afraid of Mexico because they believe propaganda instead of reality. Still a lot of Canadians coming down here. They go through the US and then come down to Mexico because they like it better than the US. So yeah, you can find maps. There's Explorer maps and stuff like that list different. I'm trying to think what's some of the good maps. Like iOverlander is a good one for camp spots, RV parks, things like that. So there's lists of things like this. And along the coast of Sonora in particular, for hundreds of miles, and I think I saw Fitzcam in here. You can subscribe to his channel. He hits up the RV parks a lot, and I think he cruises along all the way down to Guadalajara and stuff like that. And so there's more and more of those guys that just live. Now, bear in mind, the RV parks, the official RV parks, if you come down Sonora, they're catering to northerners. And so you might still pay $15, $20 a night for an RV park. Admittedly, if you're in California, you'll pay 60 or 80, but that can still add up, right? That can still be like $400 a month for an RV park. So you can go find a cool spot out, on the beach and camp there too. And, just do your homework. Make sure you know where you're at and things like that. So, okay, guys, I think we have covered it. I hope some of the questions were answered tonight that help. Hit that like button, hit that join button if you want to support our channel. The more the channel grows, the more videos I can do. That's what it amounts to. Let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see. I'm trying to keep the nice quality vlogs going, but also do one of these live streams every couple of weeks that are a little longer where we can just chat and enjoy the conversation. So thank you for your support. Thank you to the non-haters and trolls. It's nice to know that you guys are out there, and I appreciate it. Appreciate your prayers, your support, and the Patreon subscribers, of course. Shout out to you guys and our channel backers. And yeah, there's Fitzcam right there. Check out his channel. He's doing RV videos, and he's traveling, I think, more in the RV than we are at the moment, although we did bring our RV down. So check out some of the RVing channels and things like that. So you'll have a good night. Thank you. Keep brushing up on that Spanish. And amigos, buena noche. Gente, la libertad es por la gente en todo. No es por estadounidenses, no es por americanos, no es por los guatemalans. Libertad y justicia es por todos. Y todos necesitan defensa de la libertad. Buenas noches.